welcome to Landscape Photography World, the podcast for everyone passionate about landscape photography. I'm Grant Swinburne. I'll be your host on this show, talking to landscape photographers about their motivations, likes and dislikes. This week I'm talking to Slater Lemley about his work and methods. After travelling and living across the US, Slater now calls North Carolina home. He's self-taught with a passion for all things photography, open spaces, grandiose landscapes and kind people. His work has allowed him to travel often and experience many amazing parts of our world. We discuss how he got started in photography, how his style has developed and his passion for film photography. I hope you enjoy the show. Hi Slater, welcome to Landscape Photography World. Good to talk to you.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
I'm really pleased you said yes. I've seen a bit of your work around and I was very happy when you said yes to coming on because there's a couple of things I want to ask you about. But before we get to some of those, tell me about how you got started with photography and landscape photography in particular.
So I actually did an internship in business school in college, and you had to choose a local business basically to work for, and I chose a local coffee shop, local camera shop. Oh my gosh. And
bit of a difference.
Yeah, I worked at a coffee shop at the same time, so get them confused. But so I did this internship, and all I thought it was going to be was learning the ins and outs of just being a small business.
Mm-hmm.
But I actually kind of fell in love with the process of photography and photo gear while I was working there. So this is when I started it, the Canon 80D was just released. So it was like the hottest item. And so actually, because it's like, oh, wow, this is the best camera right now. That's where I started. And so I was using this Canon 80D, just shooting my friends, shooting around college campus, trying to get a couple paid jobs here and there. And but I was in Iowa, and I don't know if you know, I don't know if you know a lot about Iowa. But
I've never been
not
there,
exactly,
but I believe it's really flat.
Yeah, it's not the worst place in the United States for landscape photos, but it's not up there in the high ranks of being a good place for location.
It's not Colorado or Arizona,
yeah,
or Utah.
Exactly. So I didn't really get exposed to landscape work until I actually moved after graduating college. I moved to Michigan, and I don't know if you know about Michigan, but the fall color changes are incredible. And you have Lake Michigan on one side, and you have the Detroit River and Canada on the other side. So the whole state is just kind of a breeding ground for kind of good landscapes, but it's still not this grandiose spot. But then after a couple of years in Detroit, I moved to Colorado. And in Colorado, that's where I really dove into landscapes and nature from there.
Sure. Okay, so what got you hooked, I guess, on that landscape? What is it about the landscape, and particularly the landscape, let's say, of Colorado that got you going?
I think the part that really caught my eye initially was living in Colorado. The people you meet and the people you know are already taking photos of kind of the best spots around the state.
Mm-hmm.
And you see those photos and you're like, I wonder what that would look like if I took that photo instead of their perspective.
Yep.
And so you travel to the same places because, I mean, at this point, every amazing spot is known. No one's discovering new.
Yeah, you've really got to go very backcountry if you're. If
and I'm not much of a hiker.
Yeah.
I'll do short hikes definitely to get to spots, but I don't want to do 60 miles to discover something new. And so I was seeing all of my other friends' photos and thinking, man, if I were there, I think I could do it better. And I know that sounds kind of like being a jerk about it, but they weren't professionals and they were getting these amazing photos. So I was like, oh man, I've been doing this for a while. How good of a photo could I take? And so I would travel to these spots and I would see just looking, not through my lens, not through
Hmm.
anything, just looking at the landscape and think, well, this is incredible. And I would stand there for dozens of minutes and just think of like how many people have been to this spot and how many people have seen the same view as me. How can I capture that in a way that won't feel either disingenuous or feel like the same thing everyone's seen?
Sure.
Uh, so I would, without really, I'm not much with going off trail, especially in the U.S. We have a lot of rules and guidelines in
Yeah,
our
yeah.
parks here, and to not like trailblaze through like off the marked path, basically. And so within those limitations of the trail, I try to find some type of new perspective on the photo, whether that be finding reflections that might not be normally made. So, like finding a random puddle that could serve as a
Yep.
reflection point, or even just like waiting during different times of day than you'd normally see a specific spot. Like maybe a spot is really, really famous for sunrise. Let's see what that looks like for sunset.
Yeah, right.
And, or even just midday, maybe the harsh lighting will turn out well with that. And so, with that, those thoughts of like, can I take a better photo? I was experimenting with more uh, kind of diverse options for each spot. And I think coming out with photos that I was really proud of.
Yeah, excellent. Okay. So how would you describe your style? What do you have a style, or do you that you particularly aim for, or not?
So I've definitely changed over the years.
Mm.
When I was living in Colorado, when I first moved out there, I was like, let's take the crispest, like sharpest photo possible.
Yep.
Let's try to use the best gear. I'll go pay for a rental if I really want a specific lens to shoot a scene. And now I don't follow those rules at all. I think as I've moved toward film photography over the last 3 years, uh, the concept of sharpness has kind of moved toward the concept of having a good feel. And by feel, I kind of mean just like an evenness to the photo where
Yep.
like you feel kind of more in the spot than like, wow, that flower is really in focus, or
Yeah. Yeah.
like you can really see those mountain peaks. If I zoom in, I can see like how the pixels are perfect and everything.
Sure.
Um, so my styles it kind of evolved into let's try to make the colors match more than have like a great looking image. Like maybe I'll change up the perspective so I can have the colors fit themselves better, because film kind of treat you can treat film better that way by having an even exposure and having similar colors.
Yep.
But yeah, so I think uh, I search for a lot of pastel colors because they work well together even if they aren't in the same kind of color family or
Yeah.
in the like in w- typically working parts of the color wheel. Whereas like when I was doing really crisp digital photography, I was like, okay, I need the colors to like fit perfectly on the spectrum. If the color's here on the wheel, I need the other color to be here.
Yeah.
And like I would never
Your
move
opposites and
outside of
everything.
that.
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah. And that's where people got the orange and teal
Uh
situation
huh.
from.
Yeah.
And you can take probably the top 1,000 Instagram posts from 2015, and you'd find that almost every single one of them had that color relationship.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I don't want to be
Very
in that
influenced
anymore.
by cinema, etc. Yeah, of the time. Yeah.
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 And in the art world, that's not a bad thing
Yep.
to want to fit, because those colors work for a reason.
Yeah.
Um, but I finding the new relationships between colors that might not typically be known to work with each other has been like a real driving force in what I look for in photos now.
Cool. Cool. So why film? This is one of the things that I want to explore with you. So I mean, I started with film way back when film was all you could do,
Yeah.
simply because I had no choice. And somebody gave me a camera, but so for a young man, I guess, in relationship to myself, I'm well into my 50s, but for a young bloke that's out there trying to take photography, why film? What is it about film that
A lot of people
draws you to it?
will tell you that film forces them to slow down. It makes them consider each shot more effectively because if you're shooting medium format, you might have 12 shots per roll.
Yep.
And you're like, wow, each shot is $3.
It's got to count.
Or if you're developing and scanning or paying people to do that, plus the cost of film, it's like, oh my gosh, if I mess this shot up, I'm out $2, and I don't want to do that. So I think the process of slowing it down was really good for me, because definitely in the landscape world, I was like, if I take 100 photos today, 3 or 4 of them are probably going to be good. And now with film, it's like, okay, if I really dedicate myself to this, hopefully every shot on this roll is good. And then because there's that added cost, you aren't maybe taking the photos that might be good. You're taking the ones where you're like, I love how this looks and I want to capture it.
Got it.
So you're not weeding through like hundreds and thousands of photos. When I first started and I was using that 80D, I was taking 1,200 photos on a hike.
Wow.
And just ridiculous amounts of photos. And it's like, were any of them good? No, maybe 1, maybe 2.
Yeah.
But at the time, it's like spray and pray. Hopefully something good will come out of this. And now that I've definitely developed a skill, slowing down has been really good for me. But I think the other part of film that really draws me is having full control over the entire process, including printing. So you buy the specific film that you want to use. You have to source a film camera, which is not the easiest thing to do nowadays, especially if you're looking into the pro level gear. Now, like 5 years ago, a regular Canon AE1, like kind of a workhorse camera, you can get them for $60, $50. Yep. Now I'm seeing people sell Canon AE1s for $350, $400 just 5 years later.
Probably the retail back in 1980 or 85
exactly.
or whatever it was when it was out.
And that difference is even bigger in the medium format and large format world. You see people like a Pentax 67, even last year was $600.
Wow.
And this year they're $1,300.
Yeah.
And so it's like you have to go through the process of actually sourcing the physical unit to take the photo with now. It's not like you can just go on Amazon or go on B&H and just be like, I want the Nikon Z6. But so that part, like finding the film that you like, looking at different people's photos with that film, finding a camera, and then you can start taking photos. And then you'll take the photos, and now you're like, okay, do I develop this myself or do I pay someone to do it? And at the beginning, you're like, I'm just going to pay someone to do it. I have no skill in developing.
Yep. So
but then as time goes, well, yeah. But as time goes on, you're like, man, I'm spending $5 to get this developed and $9 to get it scanned every time, if not more. And it's like, man, if I really want to dedicate myself to this, I need to learn how to do this myself. Sure. And so up until recently, I was still paying for development, maybe from better developers than like a typical lab. I have a friend, Emily Swift, who runs her own film lab. Yep. I've sent stuff to her before, and she has done amazing color grading on my work. But now that I'm fully into film photography, I want more control. I want to be able to push my film myself, like look at my notes that I have taken and be like, okay, I want to push it half a step just because I might have underexposed a little bit.
Yep.
And when you're using a service to develop your film, not a lot of them are willing to do those extra things.
Yeah.
Because they're doing big batches with other people's
Yeah.
film.
They don't have the time to play with it and
Exactly.
do a special for you. Yeah.
And so all those things made me start trying to develop on my own. I'm still not great at it. And I think it'll just come with time, as the rest of photography kind of did for me. No, I never had any official training on any subject of photography. So it's kind of just been trial and error my whole life.
Yeah.
And then with scanning, you're opening up this world of like what scanner programs and what scanners are going to do the best for me. And then you can edit. And there's a big debate as if you should edit film, and I'll edit it. If depending upon the scanner you use, you'll get different results, different colors, and even with different programs on the same scanner.
Yeah.
So I have no shame in the fact saying that, like, I will color grade my film.
Right.
Because the point of the film is not to get the specific colors that develop it. It's the point of it is to just do photography, and it just happens to be on film.
Yeah.
That makes sense.
Yeah, no, that makes perfect sense. Makes perfect sense.
So all of that together is kind of why I like shooting film. You have full control over each step. Like, you might find better results from a camera from 1960 than a camera from 2010. And just all of those together just made me fall in love with that as a medium a lot more than digital photography. Plus, with digital, I feel like if I'm not keeping up with the latest gear, I'm falling behind.
Wow.
Whereas with film, it feels more of an art form. So it's like my skill affects the outcome a lot more than with digital.
Yeah, right.
So yeah.
That's interesting. I guess, it sounds like you're trying to be artistic with your photography. I guess, is that working for you, or are you struggling with that, or is it just something that you find comes naturally?
I think I always was looking for an outlet for some type of art, because I've never been good at drawing, never been good at painting. I tried ceramics, which I was okay at. I took 2 classes in high school. So I never had an outlet for real art until I started doing photography. And even at the beginning, I wouldn't call what I was doing art. I would call it using technology. I'm not sure if what I was doing was actually photography at that point.
Sure. Okay.
At that point, I was totally just clicking a button. Like they say, oh, why would I pay you a ton to do this job? You're just clicking a button. Well, that's what I was doing.
Yeah,
I was not any good. And so now with film and kind of dedicating things to be more artistic, it's become this great outlet for me because I never had anything like that. And I'll never be good at drawing, but I think I'm good at photography.
yeah.
So
Well, it sounds like you've got a particular approach to photography, I guess, as it relates to experience and how that can sort of transcend to art, as opposed to, as you said, just clicking a button, which,
yeah.
I know a lot of people joke about, but to be honest, it is a concept that is out there that, people think, oh, and particularly with, phone photography now, where, you look at the Google Pixel, whatever it is now, where you put motion blur in and, remove motion blur from faces and all that sort of thing, and to me, that that's less art and, as you said, more technology.
And now I don't want to discredit anyone
Oh,
who's using digital, and
absolutely not.
yeah, you're
Yeah,
not saying that either.
yeah.
But as I've transitioned to shooting film as a, I would say I'm about 50-50 digital and film now.
Uh-huh.
I like, as I'm sourcing more film gear, I'm like slowly transitioning to only film. But
Yep.
I guess I would always keep digital as a backup if I were doing work. Um, I have done a few paid gigs for film now. I was always hesitant to do paid gigs on film because that thought of just messing up was always in my head.
Sure.
Like if the shot only happens one, like a wedding, if this shot happens once
Yeah, you miss
and
it on
I'm
film. Yeah, yeah,
yeah, and so it's like okay, I out of necessity as someone doing the job, I will need to have digital,
yeah. Right.
but um, but yeah, the new phones, it's just insanity with how good of a photo you can even take.
Oh yeah. I mean,
Uh,
you look at some astrophotography now that's coming out. A phone.
I I saw
Spectacular.
someone put their phone on a tripod while I was shooting on a tripod, and they captured a photo close to what I was doing. And
Yeah.
I was using like I think at that time I was using like a Canon, like a 6D2 or something like
Uh
that.
huh.
And
Yep.
I was like, "Are you kidding me?
Yeah.
Like this camera was $1,600 and the lens was another 1,200, and you're just using your phone that you would already have."
Yeah.
And I was like, I you got to hold back the jealousy on that because it's like, oh, I worked hard to like develop the skill to do this, and now there's a program that will just do it for them on their phones,
Hmm. Yeah.
and you have this on your mind. You're like, oh my gosh, is my skill set not going to be like viable
Yeah. Is
in a
AI
couple
going
of
to replace
years?
the photographer? Yeah.
Yeah, and Photoshop actually released a bunch of like, I wouldn't call them filter. Oh, they might be filters that will make a photo look like you took it in the winter or look
Ah,
like
the neural
autumn.
the neural filters feature. Yeah.
And yeah, and I saw that. I was like, oh my gosh, someone will just be able to go shoot a location one time, do it really well that one time,
Yep.
apply the 4 different seasons of filters, and then they'll have 4 wildly different photos of the same location but during different seasons, and no one would be the wiser unless you've been to those spots yourself.
Yeah. Yeah.
Ah,
Yeah.
but when I shoot film, you can't really fake that. So I
No.
think there's like another like shooting film. There's like a genuine side to it. Even like if you shot this on a film camera, that's probably what it looked like.
Yep.
And aside from some color grading,
Yeah.
because you
And
can't
like
really like
as long as you nail the exposure, focus, and all the technical aspects,
yeah. And I think most of what I say is kind of assuming that you have, because I've shot some film awfully before. I've
Mm. Oh,
I've had
everyone has.
whole rolls, and oh yeah, I've shot like 10 rolls with a camera without getting them developed one time. And then I realized that the camera was not working. It was not, the shutter was not firing. It was just making a noise. And I thought the shutter was going.
Oh wow.
And so I had 10 full rolls of blank film from this camera. And
Nice.
I was like, I just wasted $140 to find out that like this camera's bad.
Yeah. The shutter's not working. Wow. So, what are you doing? Anything particular that you would say would be different to others? And if so, what is what is it that you're doing, and why do you do it?
So I've been really experimenting with pre sunrise and post sunset uh, photography because, excuse me, I've been finding that the colors that I search out and the scenes that I like to shoot now. I live on the beach now, by the way, in in North Carolina. And so like I'm on the East Coast and the sun will rise perfectly perpendicular with the beach.
Mm-hmm.
So I'll get this direct light as soon as the sun comes up that like hits the beach, but I don't want that direct light. I like the sky still being lit up, but the
Yeah.
foreground being this kind of muted blue.
Yeah, the blue
And
hour. Yep.
yeah, and so I've been if there was ever a thing that I would call a style that I shoot now, it is definitely a more blue form of photography. I Everyone loves golden hour, like, and I still do. Like having those nice bright oranges and yellows, and the
Yep.
shadows are perfect. But the blues and purples and reds that come out just before the sun rises and just after it sets, those are what I seek out now. Now that's the least convenient times for me to be shooting photography because I have to be up at 6 in the morning, 5:30 in the morning if I want to shoot sunrise.
Yep. Yep.
And here on the East Coast, the sun sets before I'm off work.
Yeah.
So, like at right now, it's hard to shoot that style if I don't want to like make my whole day bad, make myself tired in the morning, or try to sneak out of work early. Uh, but so I've been really, really diving deep into how to capture these like deep colors with old technology that's really not that great at capturing light.
Yeah. Not
Now,
really designed for blue hour photography per se. Yeah.
yeah, I've had a couple of photos do pretty well on social media, and I've been I've been having a hard time with it, but like trying not to judge how good my photos and my art are
Mm.
by like the engagement they get. But sometimes engagement is just confirmation that I did take a good photo.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so I've had a couple of these photos that I've like really tried hard to make with the blues and the purples do very well, at least by my standards. And if there was any like confirmation that I was doing the right thing in my style, and that's like something that I want to keep doing, was that engagement.
Mm.
And so yeah, definitely the blues and the purples. Like I'm just thinking of right now, like roles that I've shot that I haven't developed yet,
Sure.
that like I have certain shots on that I'm like, oh, I really hope that turned out.
Yeah. And to be honest, having come from that back in the the 70s and 80s when I sort of was working with film and into the 90s, that anticipation, because you couldn't look at the back of the camera because
Yeah,
all I ever had on the back of the camera was your um
with your film card.
your film card, that your conversion table. So
Oh, I usually stick the box, like the label on the
ah,
box,
yeah,
into
yep.
the my little back holder,
Mhm.
because especially if I'm shooting a roll of 36 on like some 35 millimeter, I will forget what I'm shooting
Yep.
because, like I said, I try to take it slow. Sometimes a roll will take me multiple days, maybe even a week of shooting.
Yep. Yep.
And now I've started shooting more medium format, so that's changed a little bit.
Sure.
I shot a roll on a 6x9 camera, and I was like, "Oh wait, 6 shots and I'm done." And I was a little disappointed in that one. I thought I had a few more to go.
Yeah. Well, I remember when 36 shot 35 mil came out, where you could actually get 36 shots on a single roll, and that was amazing because yes, you could shoot for weeks
Yeah,
without developing it.
and I actually have a half frame camera, so I
Okay.
can turn the 36 into 72.
Nice.
And with modern scanners, it's like the photo will be good enough for social media or a small print. So it's like, oh wow, 72 exposures
Yeah.
per roll. This is maybe starting to become back in my budget again.
Yeah, it does make a difference. So have you experimented even further? You know, you hear about people developing their film in coffee and soup and all
Film
kinds of
soup.
other unusual liquids.
I've done. I've I have a couple friends who will soup film for people,
Uh-huh.
and I had them do Dawn dish soap and lemon juice. I think it was
Okay.
citrus juice,
Yep.
and I didn't like it. I was not the
Not for
biggest
you.
fan because I was like, oh man, some of these shots might have been really good if I would have just done
Just left it.
normal developing.
Yeah.
And I've actually shot some of the there's like oh gosh, it's like joke film. It's just different styles of
Yeah.
like I think double film does it. Oh gosh, there's a couple of brands that make like weird film,
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Yep.
and I like I said earlier, I forget sometimes what roles I'm shooting,
Hmm.
and so I took this neon pink film, or that was what was in my camera, and I just did not remember, and I shot part of an event with
Oh,
this
wow.
film, and I thought I maybe had like 8 exposures on it, and I took the like roll. It was on a that was a point and shoot, and so the
Uh-huh.
roll finished reeling itself back in, and I popped back open. I look at the film that's in there, and I was like, oh no, like I ruined the first 30 minutes of this event for like
Yeah.
what I'm being paid to document. And I look at those photos now and I'm just like, what was I ever thinking buying joke film when I could just do the joke stuff in post?
That's
Like,
it. Yeah. If you want neon pink, you can just put a filter on there. Yeah.
now I have seen some amazing work by people who do souped film.
Yeah.
Uh, there's this one photographer, I think her name's Lindsay Marie on Twitter, something
Okay.
like that. And she does souped film all the time for herself and for other people.
Yep.
And I think she has this one in the works that I'm super excited to see where she did seawater and
Okay.
seaweed and sand
Wow.
and like everything you could find at the beach basically. And I want to see like how the salt
Yeah.
affects the film because she's had some wild turnouts for the things that she's used to soup film. But so I like when other people do it. I'm not a
Not
big fan of
not a
doing it
big fan
myself.
yourself. Yeah. Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's something I've never really done myself, so I'm just interested to know what people think about the process and everything, and why you would get into that. And I understand, it's the experimentation. It's really just let's see what happens, and
I've seen
I love that part of it.
yeah, and it you could almost call that more of an art form than maybe like I let me I'll take a step back. I will never say that any type of photography is not art,
Yep.
but when you are taking it a step further in kind of making it your own, it kind of becomes more of an art
Hmm.
because you're adding your own personal touch to it. And so I've seen some incredible results by people using like the joke film I was talking about, where they did like a portrait session
Oh,
in
wow.
studio. So they had a really controlled environment with
Yeah.
actual studio lights and the like they could use shorter exposures because they had these real bright scenes. And so you're not seeing the effects of the joke as much because there's more normal like just light hitting the film, like white light that will kind of drown out a little bit of the joke and bring out like a good amount of just normal photo. And with the joke added, some of them is like it looks like not a spider web, but maybe like have you seen like bubble suds
Yeah. Yeah.
like across? I've seen some portraits done on like a joke film that had kind of like a sudsy look. And the way it turned out is like the subject's eyes were like perfectly between some of the suds on some of the shots, and like maybe just their mouth was seen through the joke part, and it's like, wow, this looks like someone could have just done this as a painting idea, let
Yeah.
alone use this all, like, for all intents and purposes, joke film. And so I see people making incredible stuff. um I just don't think I'm there yet.
Yeah, fair enough. I mean, that sort of stuff is always going to be fairly unique. Do you find the images you're making are distinctive or unique? Distinctive being recognizable, I guess, in a genre versus being one of a kind in the world.
I think up until maybe a year and a half ago, my photos could have been taken by anyone who had like a direct skill set in photography, and anyone who would have traveled to the locations I was going to. And I
Mm-hmm.
think that's a hard thing, especially for landscape photographers, because if someone just as skilled as you goes to the same place, they'll probably be able to get the same photo. It's like tough to think that way. What was the original question that you
I
had
guess
asked?
do you find the images you're making, are you trying to make them
Oh,
distinctive or trying to make them unique?
so yeah, up until that point, I was not trying to be super unique. I was just trying to take the best photo possible.
Mm-hmm.
And now I think, and it depends on what I'm shooting, because I'll still shoot product photos for businesses. I'll
Yep.
still do events and stuff. And it's hard to have like a real style
Yeah.
in that type of photography.
And
Now,
the
with
customer's always going to want what they want. Yeah.
exactly, yeah, a lot of times, and I live in a really small town out here. I think for a total number of year-round residents here on the Outer Banks is about 30,000 people.
Wow.
And so there's not a lot of people looking for like real artistic insights, or even typical director of photography uh work out here. They want like, hey, I sell these products, can you go take some photos of them on the beach? And that's all like they're really
Yeah.
thinking. And I won't downplay them for doing that, because it works. Obviously that marketing style has worked for them for decades.
Absolutely.
And so you can't knock the fact that things work. But so in my own personal work, I think you can definitely tell, like, oh, I maybe not, oh, this is done by Slater, but you could tell like, oh, this is done by someone who's like really dedicating thought into the work, the piece.
Yep.
And I think I will find that, like, in my personal opinion of like, will I have I found success, the moment someone will be able to look at a photo and think that was done by Slater,
Mm-hmm.
I think that's when I will feel successful.
Sure.
Because right now I don't feel like I've really hit my stride in like being this great artist or anything.
Yeah.
So I think I'm working toward a style, but I don't have it down yet, if that
Yep.
makes sense.
Yep. No, that makes a lot of sense. And I think, a lot of artists and photographers go through that process of, understanding, there's obviously starting off with all the technical aspects of understanding how to develop that style, but you get into that
Hmm.
point where, okay, yeah, I can start to see how the style is developing, and then you can start to direct it in a particular way, and I think that's,
Yeah.
if you can get to that point, that's when you can really start to, I guess, transcend from, pure photography as an experience. So here's a shot of this mountain, I was here,
Hmm.
these were the conditions, the light was fantastic, whatever,
Yeah.
to, okay, well,
I added a little bit of warmth to make it
yeah,
feel like it was like
to where, oh, that's a Slater, or that's a Swinburne, or whatever.
yeah. And you and I I think we kind of met through Twitter, right?
Yeah,
Like,
yeah,
uh, there are some people in the photo space on Twitter where I will look at a photo and be like, that's a Briscoe.
yeah,
That is a Joey. That like you can see that their style has come through, and they've been working hard at it and basically like thinking through and doing everything they can to fit what they want, and what they want turns into the style.
yeah.
And I think I've been thinking about this a lot lately, in that traditional artists, painters, drawers, people that come from mediums that require like thought into the process of art,
Hmm.
have a leg up coming into the photo world, because they only really have to learn the technical stuff now. They
Mm, yeah.
have the thought of art down in their heads, and now it's just a matter of learning what aperture is, learning what shutter speed does, and that's it.
And they just got
So
to push a button.
yeah, at that point they just need to push the button. But there's something to be said to be able to look at something and just go, wow, I know exactly who made this. I love it. And I'm so happy that they made it. And there, in the photo world, there's copycats out there. But
Yeah, yeah,
I think in the painting world, you can, painters, like especially very skilled ones, can copy something to the exact painting. They can
yeah.
literally just replicate it. But in the photo world, there's just that little bit, like maybe the original photographer shot it at 60 millimeters,
Mm,
and the person who went to the same place and tried to shoot the same thing in the same conditions shot it at 45.
yeah,
But you can, like, that little difference is what made you think like, oh, that is a Slater.
yeah,
Like,
yeah.
that little difference is what makes it. And I think that replication is a lot harder in the photo world than in the traditional art world.
Yeah, well, I mean, there's some places, the iconic ones, which are always going to be iconic. But it's kind of like the Sydney Opera House, say here where I live, right? There's only so many places you can shoot it from,
Hmm.
particularly if you want a long exposure. You because
Yeah.
it's right on the harbour. Long exposure on a boat, it's not going to work.
Yeah.
Um,
And I've always wanted to shoot the Sydney Opera House, but now that I've been on social media for years, I've seen hundreds, if not thousands, of
yep.
photos of it.
I've taken most of them.
But that's like it. There are a lot of talented photographers that live in New York City,
Yeah,
and at this point, landscape photos in New York City aren't as enjoyable because there's so many of them,
yeah,
and there's only so many ways you can shoot the skyscrapers, just like the Sydney Opera House, and that's a problem for tons of landscape photographers, especially as the barrier for entry of getting into photography has decreased.
that said,
Because
though, I think it has another effect for those that are really creative, and that is that it stretches your creative thinking around. Okay, this shot has been done, hundreds of thousands or even millions of times, and
mhm,
to varying levels of skill, but you know the really good ones, there's only a few, and that's where you go, okay, well, I'm not going to, let's say it is the Sydney Opera House. I'm not going to do that traditional. I want the whole thing with a nice sunrise or whatever behind it. I'm going to focus
mhm,
just on the windows at the front, or I'm going to focus just on the tiles on one of the sails, let alone,
mhm.
two or three of the sails.
Yeah, and the Opera House is definitely its own unique thing because it is such a recognizable
Mm,
building or structure, just in general, that I, people without any knowledge of Australia at all might be able to look at a photo of it and be like, "Oh, it's a Sydney Opera House."
yeah,
Whereas, like with landscape work, in like nature,
yeah,
especially, you could go. into the mountains of Colorado or Washington,
Mm-hmm.
and you could still shoot a famous spot, but people
Wouldn't
won't be able to
recognize it.
be like,
Yeah.
yeah, especially if they're from other places. And I think that's one of the beauties of what social media has done for photographers is like it used to be if you took photos, those photos would not leave the circles around the people within your kind of biome, like within 50 miles of you.
Yeah.
But now you'll be able to take these photos. Like maybe people live in Utah and they go out to Moab and they go to Arches National Park here.
Yep.
And if you're from Moab, if Arches is no longer this like magical thing to you because you see it all the time. But there could be someone from Chicago who's grown up in the city their whole life that sees that image of the nature and is like, this is inspiring to me.
Yeah.
I need to go see that
Yeah.
because I've never seen anything like this before. And I think that is the beauty of when you shoot nature and shoot landscapes as a photographer, you can still reach people who haven't experienced these things. And like, especially being a photographer that specializes in going to, I would say I still specialize in going to famous spots and shooting a really good photo there. Like, it's fun to see people that are like, where is this? I need to go there.
Yeah.
Like, I will book a plane ticket today just to see this.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I think like being a photographer is almost like a service to other people to let them know there is immense beauty almost anywhere you go. You
Absolutely.
kind
Yeah.
of just like have to find it. And if you dedicate yourself to finding it like we do, you can capture it and share it with other people.
Yeah. I think that though can be a bit of a double-edged sword, and that's one of the other things that I wanted to touch on. Particularly with social media, is the impact that can have on the environment. I've spoken to quite a few other landscape photographers, and some of their experiences finding these once pristine places, trampled to death, and I remember hearing somebody that I forget exactly where it was, but it was somewhere in the US, and it might have been Canada. But they came across one of these lovely places, and whoever it was that had been there in the past had decided, oh, I'm not taking my tent with me. I'll just leave it, And so there's like a whole
Oh,
tent.
yeah, you're right. Like it's tough. I will say this. When I go into locations that are not kind of like mega famous,
Mm,
in Colorado, there's probably 10 spots that are just like everyone goes to these spots to shoot.
yep.
They're so known about. They're usually in national parks. So they're like, there is a bare level of protection there, but there's still so much foot traffic. There's not a lot you can do.
Yeah. Yeah.
Aside from the park, like the park rangers are there to stop really bad things from happening. People like climbing up trees, breaking branches, things like that. Like that doesn't happen as much because there's an aspect of people that are around whose
Yep.
job it is to stop that. But you're right. Like if you do go into the backcountry in Colorado and you take a photo and you tag the exact spot, or if people ask what the spot is and you tell them, it's suddenly, oh wow, that's a really cool photo spot. They do exactly what I did. And they're like, I bet I could take a good photo
Yeah,
there
I could do
too.
that. Yeah.
And now they're searching for that spot in the backcountry, and places that used to see 1,000 feet over the course of a month are
Mm,
now seeing tens of, if not hundreds of thousands of feet. And so the trails are getting trampled down more. People are going off
yep.
trail. People are bringing trash and their waste, basically.
Mm-hmm.
And these places where, oh, wow, I'm so lucky to have seen this. It's so pristine. You'll go back the next year and it's gone.
It's not the same. Yeah.
Yeah. And there's a couple, so the responsibility is on us to, I think it's on Instagram, it's like tag responsibly.
Yep.
ape, like something something. And that is, it may be cheesy, but it's like very important for what we do. Now, I've never been to Australia, but I've been all over the world, and I'm familiar with how different countries have better people than America in terms of like respect for the environment and respect for other people. Uh, do you find that a problem in Australia like we do in America? Because that it is a huge issue here.
It can be, yeah. In some places, it it depends a lot on how close it is to a big city. Some of the more remote places that are either going to cost you a fair amount of time or a fair amount of money to get to are
Mm-hmm.
still, pretty, in pretty good condition. But let's say Ayers Rock. Now that can cost you quite a bit of time to get to, and quite a bit of money if you're flying in there, or
Mm-hmm.
catching a bus or whatever. But um, one of the other aspects of that, particularly, is that it's culturally significant to the Aborigines and in
Mm-hmm.
that area, and they've recently stopped people from climbing on it. There was, I forget when, but probably in the 30s or 40s, somebody that went along and bolted in these pegs and put a chain up so that you could actually climb to the top of the rock.
Mm-hmm.
Perfectly natural, as it's flat all around it. So I want to go and stand on top of it and see the view from the top. So
Yeah.
without thinking about the cultural significance, people, over many decades were trampling up beside this chain, and that's created its own little groove that was never there, and probably wouldn't have been there through natural erosion or anything. So you
Mm-hmm.
see some of those places. That said, the management of the area around Uluru, as they call it now, or Ayers Rock, has changed significantly in the last 20 years. And that land management, the Aboriginals have a real say in how the land is managed. They're in
Mm-hmm.
charge of actually running some of the businesses there around the accommodation, etc. And they've established a way that you can experience it without culturally damaging it, and
Mm-hmm.
B, physically damaging, and I think, so as people become more aware of it, yes, heavily trafficked, a place like that. But then there are other places which you can get to, let's say, southwestern Tasmania, right?
Mm-hmm.
There's very few roads in there. There's very few, people take the time to actually hike through that, wilderness. And there are valleys in there which I'm pretty sure probably haven't seen more than a dozen people in the last 50 years.
Mm-hmm.
Which they may or may not be particularly photogenic. I don't know, because anyone who's taken a camera in there probably not tagging exactly where it is.
Yeah.
But I mean, it varies. I mean, we have idiots that leave their trash around and whatever. I always carry a bag with me, and if I see anything, I try and pick it up and take it with me if I can carry it.
Yeah. I wish I could say that we were like more similar in those aspects, because here in America, we one a lot of places don't take the input or advice from the native people of the lands, and so land that was sacred to them uh, will become, even today, national parks, and be a source of just like kind of turmoil in their lives, because like this is their land, this is where their ancestors were, and we're converting it into a tourist attraction. And there are still some places in America where your normal everyday person would not be able to have access. There's there's actually a tribe in kind of the Grand Canyon area here in the U.S. called, I forgive me, everyone, I will mispronounce it. It's like the Havasupai,
Uh-huh.
and they have there's this waterfall and kind of riverbed area that oh, I think it's the Havasu people, and then the waterfall is called the Havasupai waterfall.
Yeah.
I'm probably wrong on that, but in order to actually trek to this place, you need permission from the tribe. You
Mhm.
need to pay the tribe. I'm not sure the full sum of money, but a sum of money, and then they will basically control which places you can go to around it. So it's this vastly beautiful place. But in order to access, you need active participation from the native people of the area. But that is not the case through most of the United States.
Yeah. Yeah.
Uh, you'll find, I think it's Yosemite and Yellowstone and some of our most famous national parks were homelands to like native people that have been there for dozens of generations.
Yep.
And now they're just like where we go for our Instagram photos.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
I've heard there's also in Yosemite and Yellowstone in particular, ticketing for some of the the locations, and queues of people wanting to take the shot for the gram. Yeah.
oh yeah, there's
We
this
haven't
one.
quite got to that stage here, but I don't think it's
Well, I'm
far off,
jealous of that.
unfortunately, in some places.
There's a couple of spots where, especially in Utah and like the Moab area, there it's like super Instagrammable spots
Hmm.
where if you like set up a blanket and you sit on the blanket and you have the person in the shot, it's like
Yeah,
this
yep.
beautiful as the sun rises. There are lines of 100 people
Yeah.
waiting to take the exact shot, and in fact, they will just reuse the blanket that other people are using in the same shot. And that is the case in a ton of national parks. Now, one place that I really like to go to in Colorado, it's not a national park, but it's still protected lands, is called Maroon Lake.
Yep.
And then when you look over Maroon Lake, you see the Maroon Bells, which are two peaks, and the sun rises perfectly, hits the peaks of them. I went there dozens of times when I was out in Colorado, and it's like one of the best views you can see. But everyone has the same idea, and they go for sunrise.
Yep.
And when you're there for sunrise, some days, especially on the weekend, you will see 80 photographers, all with their tripods, like lined up right next to the water, trying to get the reflection and everything. And in recent years, the water has been so low that people are stepping over the roped boundary that
Yeah.
is out there to protect those lands so they can just get a better reflection.
Yeah.
And so it's easier when there's a lot of people there to be like, for everyone to come together and be like, don't do that.
Yeah.
But when it's fewer people, it's hard for me to turn to someone and be
Yeah.
like,
Be the
don't step over the boundary. Because it's like, in America, there are crazy people who have weapons everywhere. And so it's like, am I going to be the one to say something to this guy who just might have a weapon?
yeah, and decide
And
to snap at that point. Yeah.
yeah, like me telling him don't go off trail is the thing that makes him snap. And so it's like I will sit back and try to be like, oh man, I should tell him not to do that, and then I just end up not doing it. And maybe that's an irrational fear of mine, but I think it's worth thinking of, like
Yeah.
when you're in those situations. And so, but I think just the culture of respecting nature and everything is not there here,
Yeah.
and I I
There's
don't see a
definitely,
route.
there's definitely elements here. I mean, the gun thing's a bit less of an issue, though. They're out there.
It is a
Um,
very distinctly American problem,
yeah,
I will say.
yeah. I mean, I remember the times I have visited the US being not shocked because I knew it was there, but a little taken aback by the I guess the volume and the openness of people carrying guns around. Yeah, I've visited
Yeah.
Texas a couple of times, and it was kind of a bit of an eye opener.
Well, you kind of went to the breeding ground of that, so
Yeah.
that is a little less representative of the U.S. as a whole. But when you travel to a lot of like nature spots, people think like, oh, if I bring my gun, I'll be safer because of like animals and things like that.
Mm.
But it, I mean, I don't want to like get on my high horse and be like bear spray is more effective than a gun, but like that is
It is. Yeah.
something that people should be taught here.
Yeah. Yeah. So what's the furthest you've traveled to get a shot?
To get one shot
Yeah.
or just like
Oh,
uh let's see here. So I did in 2019, I what 2019? Oh my gosh, all the years are kind of melding together.
yeah. The last 2 years have been like 1 year and 5 years combined. Yeah.
Yeah. I think 2018, 2019, around there. I quit my last like corporate job until now. And I went on what was basically like a 35-day road trip to Acadia National Park in Maine.
Mm-hmm.
And because I had this idea, like I wanted to be the first person in the US to see the sunrise on just one day.
Sure.
And during that time of year, the first place that the sun rises or like the sun will hit basically
Yep.
in the United States is Acadia National Park on Cadillac Mountain. And so I was lucky and I timed out the trip for this to be on a new moon. So I was like, oh, great, I'll shoot Astro, stay in the park all night, and try to be on the highest point, like standing up. I'm a decently tall person. I think I'm 6 foot, almost 6'1". So it's like, if I'm on the highest point, no one else in the country will the sun hit before me. And so I went out and shot Astro that night, and I brought like a camping chair and a blanket, and I was like chilling on my phone, and I like just waiting and waiting, and then dozens and dozens of hundreds of other people started to show up, and I was like, oh no, they have the same idea. Like, are they gonna try
Go and
to
climb on one of their shoulders.
yeah, or like is someone going to have like a ladder? Like, I know irrational fear didn't happen, but I was like, did I drive across the entire country and it might not happen like what I wanted? So that's probably the longest I've gone for one. I did it to shoot the sunrise as well. And so I just had my camera on oh gosh, what's the setting? It just keeps repeating, taking a
Oh yeah.
photo,
Yeah.
like so I had my camera set up to do that so I could just immerse myself in the experience of the sunrise. And then sun rose, people started clapping, and I was like, wow, this is like one of the best experiences of my life. And then I like stepped down from the rock I was standing on. I like get to my camera and I look at the photos. I'm like, this looks awful on photo. It's not a good sight to photograph because there's no like valleys or anything. It's like it's kind of water, but it's not like good looking water.
Yeah.
And so I was like, man, I drove like 2,000 miles for a bad photo, but I had a good experience.
Yeah.
But so I did that, and on that same road trip, I stopped like all along places in the U.S. And I actually, from Maine, I drove down to where I'm currently living in the Outer Banks of North Carolina, and then drove back to Colorado. So I was on the road for like 35 days. Had to change my oil twice, and
that's a big trip. Yeah.
yeah.
Do you think
I don't think I could do that again.
Yeah. Do you think the pandemic has changed your attitude towards traveling and photography?
Yeah, I actually so it hurt because I was kind of hitting my stride in photography right when the pandemic was hitting. Like I was starting to work with brands, and then COVID hit, and those offers to work with them kind of went away because they no longer needed the work. And then COVID obviously lasted for a lot longer than we thought it was going to. So the work that I thought might have been there for me when it COVID ended, it's still not there because COVID hasn't really ended. So like my attitude toward photo work and personal photos has definitely changed, because I think of each job that I'm offered as kind of something that's more fleeting than it was before. Kind of pre-pandemic, there was an abundance of work out there for good photographers.
Yep.
And I think it's starting to come back, but like for 2 years there now, there not a lot of companies or individuals even are really thinking I need to get photos done.
Yeah.
And so the business side, you have to look at each job and think like, not compromise, but you're almost willing to take less than you used to just to have the opportunity to still do it for work.
Sure.
So that's definitely changed for me on the business side. But personally, I think a lot of my photos I took by myself anyway, even pre-pandemic. And so the act of driving from my house to a location in nature and not being around other people, and the fact that I could still do that in the midst of the entire pandemic, like even at its worst, was a comforting factor. So if anything, photography turned into like something that I would use as an escape, that to make things feel normal again, because you couldn't do almost anything else.
Yeah.
So I still kind of view it as this kind of solitary thing. I don't work with a ton of models or production team in my own personal work. So it still remained kind of the same. As weird as that is, like a whole pandemic didn't change my personal work at all, but it's kind of true.
Yeah, interesting. So about your local area now, you said you're in is it North Carolina?
Yeah. So I'm in a place called the Outer Banks.
Yep.
It's basically, if for anyone that doesn't know, it's barrier islands that kind of protect the coast of North Carolina. And for all intents and purposes, they're just really big sandbars that people now live on.
How is that influencing? You know, I know that you've fairly recently moved there, only in the last few months. How does that influence how you shoot now?
Well, it's definitely changed my ability to. So, okay, it's expensive to live here, and I'm not making like much more money than I did before.
Sure.
And so shooting film, I've kind of slowed down even more because cost is such a factor out here. Like I'm on an island, and the closest, like, I mean, we have a Walmart that's 15, 12 miles away, something like that.
Yep.
So about like a 20-minute drive. But if I wanted to go clothes shopping, I would have to drive an hour and a half to get to the closest area that like I could. I mean, there's stores here and there, but if you want to go for a day where you visit like multiple shops, you have to drive to a bigger city. And for me, that's been a big change because I lived in a city before. And like my whole life, I lived in Milwaukee and Denver and Detroit. And so it's like these bigger cities across America.
Yeah, where you had a mall down the road or whatever,
Exactly. And so I can't buy film as frequently. So I've started stockpiling instead of like just going to get what I needed. So that's definitely changed up how I kind of source materials. And with shooting, the amount, kind of where I've lived before, the amount of light that you get is more heavily in the evening, like just due to how time zones worked and where I was in those time zones. I would have more evening time and less morning time. And now I have a ton of morning light and no evening light. Like the sun sets at 4:50 p.m. right now. And so I have to really rethink. Like I used to book golden hour at 5:30.
Yeah.
And now it's like golden hour starts at 3:30, 3:45. And I'm just like, gosh, now I need to work around people's like lives, because
Yeah.
usually people are free in the evenings to do stuff. So now if I'm needing to work with anyone on a shoot, I need to work around these like actual schedules and pay them more than I would have, because they have to leave their normal jobs.
Yep. Yep.
Like if I'm hiring people to help out. So that's changed up that part of the shooting. But also it's like the landscapes out here are flatter and kind of have different color orientations that I'm accustomed to. I was saying earlier that I really like the blues and the purples, and that's kind of more of a recent thing because I can see them now.
Yeah.
Before that, it was just dark, dark, dark sunrise.
Yeah.
Because things blocked out the sun before it could like breach the horizon.
Sure.
And now it's like, oh no, I see the sun immediately.
Yeah.
And so I would say that the landscape being flatter has changed like how I set up for a photo, especially a landscape shot. I try to search for high ground, because a lot of the time it's so flat that like I like a good horizon, but it's like it's just water, or water, the horizon, then sky. There's like not a lot to work with.
Not a lot of features. Yeah.
Yeah. So I try to search for high ground so I can have like kind of an angle down, instead of, I used to shoot like straight out.
Yep.
And now I try to shoot like this and have like actual foreground that's interesting.
Yep.
You know, and in Colorado, it's like I would shoot like this.
Yeah.
Like, because like you have the peaks and you're like, and when you're shooting in the cities, it's like you shoot flat because you get these big structures coming up. Yep. And now it's like, wow, if I want to shoot anything interesting, I need to be pointed down, and I need to sacrifice some of the empty space of the sky to have like any type of interesting shot. I think you'll see in here, I'm going to actually check my Instagram to make sure I'm not like things are posted in a way that like makes sense for this. But if you see like some of my more recent shots, I try, like there's more foreground than I've ever done before.
Sure.
And I mean, it's definitely led to some, now I'm scrolling my own Instagram, I need to not do that. It's definitely led to me trying to find subjects that I'd never thought of before. I'm doing a series right now where I'm calling it Sunrise Silhouettes. It kind of, I only named it that because I like alliteration, and it's kind of just what makes sense in it. And it's beach shots of people or animals or anything on like walking on the beach, and because of just how the light is hitting, you only see their silhouette, but you see these big colors from the rest of the scene, because like again, the purples and the blues and the reds. And so I have never experienced the ability of being like, wow, I can get outlines of things and have this interesting light. It was always just like trying to shoot the subject exposed, and now I can shoot subjects unexposed and have kind of this anonymity. And so that's definitely changed since I've been out here. Now, I would not say it's rural here, but there are a lot of people, like it's North Carolina, it's kind of the South. There are a lot of people that don't take too kindly to having their photo taken. And this is a little different from like cities. People in the cities just ignore you usually, like if you're out there with a camera. But if you're out on the beach with a camera, people are like, "Did you take my picture?" And I'm like, no, I promise. Like, here, I'll even show you. Like, yeah, not on purpose. Like, it is a picture of you, but it's not you. It is a silhouette of a person. So there's no distinguishing factor of it being you. And now it has happened to me where people have been like, "Can you please delete that?" And I was like, "Sure." Like, no worries. Like, I don't want to make a big deal of it. Like, I'll wait for the next person to start walking. sometimes they don't come, but I can get the shot again.
Yeah.
So, but like Southern people, and I don't want to generalize too much because I've only been here a little bit, just don't like having cameras around.
Yeah. Wow.
And so that's been a big change for me because especially if you go to like New York City, street photography
Oh yeah.
is abundant.
Yeah. It's everywhere.
Like,
Yeah.
you'll get someone with like a 400 millimeter lens 30 feet from you, like
Yep.
just, and you see it pointed right at you. You're like, here we go. Like, I'm probably getting my photo taken right now.
That's it. Yeah.
But I'll walk around here with a basic like TLR film camera, and people like older people will be like, don't you take my photo. And it's just like, I wasn't even like framing anything to show that I would have been taking a photo. I'm just holding the camera.
Holding the camera. Yeah.
But in their head, it's like their privacy is being ruined. Now it might not help that I'm in kind of a tourist destination. So like people are traveling from all over. But yeah, like that's been hugely different lately. I used to be able to set up my tripod in the city and like really frame up a shot, and no one would bother me. And with any amount of gear, even like a point and shoot, people will be like, what are you doing over here?
Wow. Yeah, I mean, I've had very few experiences. I actually got told to move on. I was doing some architecture stuff here in Sydney last week, actually, I think it was, and a security guard came and told me I couldn't take a photo from where I was taking it. It was publicly accessible, but technically on the land that the building owned. The building owners owned. So I just, okay. Meanwhile, I was using my camera, my phone as a remote. I don't know, not quite nailed the positioning, but it was okay.
Yeah.
So while I was talking to him, I was sitting there with my thumb on the shoot button, just taking shots anyway. He wasn't in them. It was literally a shot of the building. But
I think, don't we all have a story of like a random security guard?
Oh yeah, I think so. Yeah.
And I've been in the situation where it's like they told me to stop taking photos, but I was firmly on like public land. There's no way this could be. And it's like, who are you to tell me? And then, but again, I don't like making a fuss too much.
No, nor do I. No.
So I'll just move on. Yeah. But it's like, man, if I could have stayed there for another like 10 minutes, the sun would have been up perfect.
Yeah.
And I'd have this amazing shot. Or like you walk like 100 yards away, and then you see the light like just crest the horizon as you're walking. You're like, oh, no, like
I know the feeling. This was at night, so it wasn't that bad. The light wasn't going to change much. So yeah, it still annoyed me. But anyway, there's always going to be somebody that's I guess, to be honest, he probably wasn't overstepping the mark. I just thought it was a bit overzealous, but whatever.
Yeah, and at a certain point, like we all have to realize they're just doing what their job is.
That's right. Someone's told them to move people along if they're hanging around that area too long, which is fine.
And then when I was in Denver, I kind of involved myself into the skateboarding culture a little bit. Now, I don't skateboard, but like if you talk with skateboarders and you befriend them, like, and going to skate parks to shoot photography is an amazing experience.
Yeah.
Because it's such a like dynamic subjects, and a lot of skaters love having pictures done.
Sure.
And so I like got heavily involved in the skate culture, and in skate culture, like you will get shooed away in many places. So in my head, I'm like, oh, but I want them to be able to stay and like fight the power and like skate where they want. But in my head, I'm like, I don't want to make a fuss. Like, I'm conflicted on the two. Yeah, it's like, oh, it'd be so cool. Like, just let us stay for a while. And then it's like the wimp in me is like, oh, maybe we'll leave and like, we'll find another place. But it's like, oh, that place would have been perfect. And then you start getting into like the ethics of like how far you're willing to go for the perfect spot.
Yeah.
And then I start thinking like, oh man, people go like, this is a bad road to go down, because this is how people start like stepping over the rope and going. And so it's like, I would not call myself like a rule breaker or like a really rule follower, but like I always try to think like, what is that line where if I cross it, I'm starting to become what I dislike.
Yeah, you don't want to be that person, you know.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then and the thing is that I think also the more you know, a photographer or, you know, a number of photographers, you know, do stand their ground and start, you know, arguments and, you know, maybe even escalating the situation where they shouldn't, you know, then that actually doesn't help the photographic community, because, you know, photographers in general get a reputation in that person or those people's minds that, you know, they're out to cause trouble, you know, when mostly all they want to do is take a nice shot, you know.
And I will say there is a certain genre of photography where technically what they're doing is frowned upon by the law.
Yeah.
However, they are doing their absolute best to leave zero trace of themselves being there. And I'm more talking like urban exploration.
Yeah, I know.
Drift,
I know the
like,
sort of thing you're talking about. Yeah.
Yeah. Drift, who's a buddy of mine, he like climbs skyscrapers and like dangles his feet off of it, which shows his Vans. And it's like, that's technically not legal, but it is damn cool. And it is like a form of art that it might be bending the rules or breaking the rules, but like that is like a level of worth it. And because of how he does it, it's not like he's up there tagging graffiti on famous points or breaking things or. And so I think if you have that level of, I will make sure there is no trace of me ever being here, then you can start determining like, can I bend this rule?
Yeah.
And I'm not at a point where I'm fully like my steps don't leave any mark. And like, because I usually bring a tripod, and like when you use a tripod, sometimes it digs in because your gear is heavy. It's like, that's not leaving no trace. And so my own work is not at that level of like the willingness to start bending the rules on it. But when I see other people's work where they're like finding abandoned places that you're probably not supposed to be at, I still view that as amazing work. And I think necessary work, because it's documenting these places that we would never see.
Yeah. Or
they're
documenting
taking
a city
risk
from an angle that you're not normally going to see, like some of the drift stuff. I mean, I'm kind of torn with some of that stuff personally, only because, you know, I mean, some of what he does, I think operates fairly safely, because he's, you know, he's had some military training which helps him assess risk and, you know, do things that other people probably wouldn't normally be able to do safely. And it's unfortunately the influence that can have on people that aren't as experienced, don't understand some of the risk assessments which, you know, he might be making, and go and try and do some of these things. You know, it's kind of like some of those shots you see where, you know, and some faked, some not faked, where, you know, there's people holding their girlfriend over a precipice, you know, you know, and you kind of go, that's just taking it one step too far. And for me, it's not so much the act that they're doing that bugs me. It's the influence that can have on people that don't assess the risk and then end up fallen off a building or falling off a cliff because they haven't done that risk assessment. They don't understand what's involved, and they're not taking safety precautions.
I think that's why it's important for people who do create work like that to not show the how-to.
Exactly.
And I think Tripp does a good job. He does not show like, here's how I got in and here's how I climbed this. He's like, final result. That is all you get to see. And that's how it is for a lot of those like abandoned building exploration people. However, sometimes you'll see a TikTok like, we hopped a fence right here. We climbed to the second floor, and
here's the Marauders map of how to get there.
Exactly. And so I think that's the line. Like that is the line crossed. And in like artists themselves are known to be risk takers and rule breakers just throughout all of world history. And I think that shouldn't stop because of maybe certain risk, as long as the right people who are most adept are the ones taking the risk. And so when it comes to drift, like I think that work that he creates is important because it's good for his mental health. It is therapeutic to him and just personally. Plus, it is an incredible thing for us to look at. So I think it's important, but I like you said, at the moment people start imitating it, it might become an issue. And that's where the common sense of the people has to come in and be like, well, I'm not an artist. I'm not the one taking the risk. Like, I'll just enjoy this. And so I think you can't put too much pressure on the people that are doing it to be like discouraging people from also trying it, because maybe they will see the same benefit of it. But
that may be right. As I say, it's just a personal thing where I go, I look at it and I guess
for
it's
me,
the father in me coming out. I wouldn't like to see my children replicating that.
For me, when I like the line that I see is we know like base jumping, like parachutes, and I have in Colorado, I became friends with some people who do that, and they are also photographers, and they will jump while holding like they're harnessed in like a camera to their chest, and they'll jump, take their parachute, and then try to turn themselves to get a shot that no one's gotten before. But they'll show the whole process, and I'm just like, man, they're not telling people like, oh, they have 1,000 jumps like already before they started taking photos doing it. And so it's like they're documenting it as this like incredible thing, this super fun thing, and it looks easy because they're so skilled,
they're experienced. They've been doing
it. And then that opens up the ethics of like, oh, should people be parachuting here? Should like, is that danger worth the shot, basically? And so I think they are the extreme of that, and their stuff scared. Like that's my level of like, I don't like that because I get scared. Like that's my level of scare, where I'm more concerned than anything. And so like there is definitely a line, and if you're right in saying it's kind of like a personal line of where we each put that level of risk as being beneficial because of the art, and like detrimental because of the danger.
And
you'll never catch me doing that.
Nor it's not my sort of thing as well. I mean, I don't mind heights and whatever, but I'm not about to climb a radio mast on top of a skyscraper. It's just
have you seen that video of him? I have, where the drone's like circling around. Oh my gosh, I get like anxious just thinking about that.
Oh yeah. All right. I guess we're about an hour and a half in, so we probably should think about wrapping up soon. It's been a great chat. Have you ever hit a
Yeah.
creative wall, and how did you handle that?
Oh my gosh, I'm in one literally right now
Yep.
because I've been trying to do that sunrise silhouette series, and I've finished 16 of what I dedicated myself to doing 50 of. I wanted to have enough to create a book of just these silhouettes,
Sure.
and I've shot a ton. I probably have another 30 just like in my camera that could be turned into pieces and on film that I just haven't developed. But I'm starting to think like, oh, are these just starting to all look the same? Like this, are the subjects different enough to really like uh be considered like a separate pieces even? Like
Mhm.
obviously they're different photos taken on different days, but like if they look so much alike, are they really like different something I'm going through like just, and I'm not sure how I will handle it. I've taken 2.5 weeks off of like going out during sunrise to try to capture something because I want to sit down and try to make something with what I already have. Now, I think something that will help me in that is changing up how I'm shooting. I've shot most of the silhouettes with long lenses because I want people to be far away. I want it to kind of be compressed to a certain point. And when you're shooting with a longer lens during sunrise, like there's a greater concentration of the colors among the entire photo. Whereas if you shoot wide, you get the darkest, like it almost black during
Yeah, yeah.
sunrise, like in the clouds could be lit up real bright. But I don't want that. At least in the ones I shot, I did not want that huge spectrum. I wanted it compressed to
Got it.
almost like a 3-color gradient
Yep.
instead of this like giant thing. And I think I'm going to change my thought on that, on shooting only longer lenses. I'm talking 150 to 400 ish area. Um, and maybe try to shoot stuff at 80 or even wider. I don't think I'm ready to go full into like 16 millimeter
Yep.
or anything like that. But like maybe if the later pieces just include more of the spectrum and are just a little wider. I shoot most of them vertically because I'm dumb. Because I'm shooting stuff for, so like it kind of sucks to shoot it, like to say you're shooting it for social media, but I'm shooting it to share with other people.
Sure.
And it's led me to avoid a landscape style while
Yep.
I'm doing these, because I've shot a couple landscape styles and I thought, wow, this is a really great solo photo, but it doesn't fit the series because because it is wider, the subject, the silhouette, does not take as much space in the shot.
Sure.
And
Sure.
so, or at least horizontal space.
Yep.
And so like that's been severely limiting in terms of like what I can capture, because sometimes the scene is just better landscape than it is
Yep.
portrait. And so I think maybe just what I will try to do is reevaluate the limitations I've set for myself,
Mm-hmm.
so I could continue doing the series that I'm really interested in doing, but not feel like I'm constricted in it. So it's definitely something I'm working on. And before this, I never understood when photographers were saying that they were stuck on something. I
Yep.
never like I had never experienced that. Which like thank God. Like because I never knew how bad it could be. I
Yeah.
would see people tweet out like, "Oh, I'm just not feeling my art lately," and I was like, "What are you talking about? Art's great. Like, why? Like, why would you ever not feel it?" And now it's like, oh my gosh, when you actually try to sit down and like do one thing for a while, it starts to become a burden, and you just need to, I need to find a way to make it not burdensome.
Yeah, need to break out. Yeah. So
Yeah.
I mean, some people do it by taking a break. Some people, go and shoot something different, or take a break from project X and do, maybe even start another project. I've done that a few times, and I've got a couple of unfinished projects which I want to get back into, but just never found the motivation to get back into.
Do you ever just look at those older photos and be like, wow, that was really cool.
Yeah.
Why did I stop that? And then you
Yeah.
start thinking more on it. You're like, oh no, that's why I stopped.
Yeah, definitely. So are there any photographers out there that you think I should be talking to?
So I'll give you a couple in the film world, and then maybe one or two kind of in the digital space.
Sure.
If we're looking into the digital space specifically, I think that oh gosh, what is their at? Oh, everyone I know in the photo world outside of like my personal friends are from social media. So I need to remember what they're here. I will find their ads. Oh. Yeah. In the film world, there's his name's Sam on Twitter. His at is Knife Maker Guy. He used to make knives. He is big into, like, most of what he shoots is film, and he does infrared photography as well as one of his main kind of facets. And he's from Indiana, and he lives in South Carolina now. So and he does a lot of like rural street, I would say. Like, if that is it a style?
I think it is. Yeah, I think I get what you mean. Sort of like your small town.
Yeah.
Some people
I
call
really
it
like
banal.
that.
Yeah, the lonely service station, or the lonely shop store that's beside a dusty road or whatever.
Definitely. And then, oh gosh, I don't know if he's actually film. I should have. Well, Sean Murphy is another photographer who I think has a style that I look at and I think like, oh, I wish I shot stuff like that. But it's just not my like forte.
Yeah.
Like, I wouldn't be good at it. So those two, you probably know Daniel Stagner.
Yeah, he's on my list. Yeah.
Yeah, big landscape photographer guy.
Yep.
Let's see here. I've been hanging around a lot of portrait photographers, so like my knowledge of the landscape world is not as strong anymore. Do you know Eamon? Eamon?
I don't think I do.
He's been doing a lot of 35 millimeter film from around like the American West and kind of certain parts of Europe as well. So he makes some incredible stuff. And then also in the film world is his name is Nate Sanchez. On Twitter, I think it's just at Sanch.
Yep.
And he's been doing some nighttime long exposure film work that's just like really impressed me lately. So yeah, those are some people that they might not be like famous people or anything, but I draw like inspiration from them.
Right. I'm not about just famous people, so
yeah. At Darren Films, or Darren's Film or something like that, is another film person who he's also from the Midwest, so kind of his name's at Dixon_bots, but he does almost exclusively film work. And I kind of have this obsession with like middle America
Yep.
when it comes to work that I like to look at, because it's so different from what I shoot personally.
Sure.
I shoot mountains and coast and cities. But yeah, you're saying like the banal look of just like
Yeah.
a town.
Ordinary town or street scenes or things, or a house,
Yeah. I would say that type of work makes me think about art more than like a typical landscape photo would.
Yeah. 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 That grand, vista that, everybody says, oh, that's an amazing looking place as compared to,
Mm-hmm.
a house,
Yeah. I actually a close friend of mine who is like in the landscape world. Um, Let me bring up his Twitter real quick. I met up with him in Western North Carolina, where he lives. He's like a big mountain guy. His name is Photo Fern. Fern
Yep.
is his. Um, and he primarily shoots digital, but he inherited a film camera from his grandfather and has started to shoot some of the same stuff. Like he'll do the same shot on film and on digital. And I love to see like the comparisons
Yeah.
between the two, mostly because like most of the time I dedicate myself to either shooting film or digital,
Mm-hmm.
just because it's kind of cumbersome to walk around with.
Managing multiple cameras in multiple formats is a challenge. I know.
When I shoot digital, I already carry two bodies, with one with a long lens and one with a wide lens.
Yeah.
And as soon as I'm like, oh, I'll shoot film too, it's like, oh, where do I put it? Like, do I have three camera straps, like film in the middle and digital on the sides or something? And plus, film cameras are just like enormously heavy sometimes, so it's like,
Particularly the medium format.
Yeah, I've been I rented a couple of different medium formats from, there's this local photographer, old guy, like he is retired and but he doesn't want to sell any of his stuff. So I'm like, well, can I rent it from you? And he's like, well, how much? I was like, I'll give you $50 for the weekend to rent this. And so I took out like his Pentax 67. He had like a Mamiya RZ 67, and like these things are tanks. It's just like heavy metal.
Yep.
And it's like you put it around your neck and you're like leaning forward as you walk because it's just so hefty. And he has this like wooden grip on his Pentax, and it's like in order to shoot the camera, you're like this.
Wow.
And it's like, I'm not a small guy, and I feel like this camera is just huge. And like you're holding it up to your eye, looking through the viewfinder, and your arms are getting tired, and you can like feel the camera start to drift down. And it's like, holy cow, people used to use these as like their main camera.
Yeah.
And meanwhile, a mirrorless camera nowadays, it's like, oh yeah, this weighs half a pound, and the lens is actually 4 times its weight.
Exactly. Yeah. All right. Well, I've got one last, and probably for most of the listeners, the most important question. Do you like pineapple on pizza?
I love pineapple on pizza. I think it is a great addition to a pizza, especially if there's Canadian bacon on it. I think it's underrated, and I think people who don't like it need to stick to the kids menu.
It's good to find somebody with a firm opinion on it.
Yeah, I don't like to waver on my pineapple on pizza opinion. I gotta stick in confidence with it, because otherwise people will make fun of me.
Well, it has been absolutely wonderful chatting to you, Slater. I've really enjoyed catching up with you, and it's been amazing, hearing about some of your journey and so forth. Where can people find your stuff?
So I'm at Slater Lemley on every social media. Don't go to my website, because I haven't updated it in a year. So if you find my website at all, it's not representative of what I'm currently doing. So Twitter and Instagram are probably the best spots.
Fair enough. All right. Well, thanks very much, mate.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it. And I hope that I've been listening to a couple of episodes of recent, and I hope this kind of keeps going for you and it becomes a big thing for you. Or if you don't want it to be a big thing, that's fine. But I think it's a kind of a great concept too, to interview people who might not be like famous photographers, because there's good insight into kind of what they shoot and why they shoot.
Yeah. Well, for me, I just have a fascination, and it helps me in my own creative thinking as well. But I have a fascination for hearing about how people do what they do and why they do what they do in particular.
Mm-hmm.
I just find it really interesting. And I started this back when we were in a very severe lockdown here in Sydney, where I couldn't go out and take photos. So it was all about, okay, so what do I do?
Yeah.
So I started this, and I'm gonna keep it going for as long as I can keep motivated at it, and as long as I can find interesting people to talk to. And I haven't had a problem finding interesting people to talk to so far, so which has been great.
And I'm sure there's probably tons of people who are like, this is what they've been searching for, something to kind of release what they've been thinking about during that time.
Yeah. All right. Well, thanks, mate. I'll certainly look up some of your recommendations and see if we can get them on in the future sometime.
Yeah, for sure. And I'll make sure to get you the photos or video or whatever you were.
Yeah, no worries. Thank you.
Awesome, Grant. I really appreciate it.
Okay. Thanks again for listening to Landscape Photography World. I hope you enjoyed the show, and keep listening, because I'll be joined by some great guests in upcoming episodes. You can find my work and this podcast at grantswinburnphotography.com. I'm also on Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, and YouTube. I'm Grant Swinburne, and hope to see you out shooting soon.